So Anna Lacerda is from research, so she is a professor of epidemiology and director of the...
No.
Sorry, that's, oops, so I got it wrong. So there you go. Oncology, Master in Palliative Care, Pediatric Palliative Care Program in Lisbon, Department of Child and Adolescent Oncology, and the Portuguese Institute of Oncology in the most beautiful city in Portugal, Lisbon. And Ana Lacerda is all with you now. Thank you.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. It's, of course, as everyone else has said before me, wonderful to be here in Rome. So thanks to the Maruzza Foundation and thanks to everyone for coming. And so when I was asked to talk about this, I thought, why me? I'm not a psychologist, and I'm going to talk at the second day or the third day, however you want to take it. So everything has already been said about listening. But then I thought, well, you've been part of a multidisciplinary team for the past decades, so you have come through a lot of things. And you will just tell them what you wish someone had told you and taught you at the beginning of your career instead of learning it at your own expense. So you'll probably feel like you've heard many of the things I'm going to say in the past 2 days. So we're just going to try to summarize and focus it around children who are dying. And I will start with what's obvious, that death is a complex, universal, yet unique and uncertain experience. And that we in palliative care are especially geared to help people who are suffering, and many of them, of course, dying. And one of the aims that we are trying to achieve is to help them have what is called a good death. And recently, this model for a good death in children has been suggested, saying that it is actually a fluctuating measure depending on the level of needs, the experiences that the child and all involved are going through, and the level of control. So it's a fluctuating measure that is not always the same. But we all know that the death of a child is, of course, a devastating experience. And it is so for all involved, not only for the families, also for the healthcare professionals, and for the child. We express it differently and, of course, in different measures, but we all do suffer. But this talk is about, this talk is about the child. So often the very first question that comes to our minds is, does this child know that she is dying? And from my work with children with cancer, I would say most of the times, yes, they do. Even if they decide not to acknowledge it, if they decide to hide it from us, they don't want to talk about it, but yes, they know. And why do they know? Because they are experiencing it firsthand. They know that something is not right, they are getting worse, and they also take cues from the outside world, so they know. And they experience what Dame Cicely Saunders called total pain. And it's been described that sadness is the utmost feeling that these children are going through. But right after sadness, there's fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being forgotten, of being replaced in their role, in their family, in their group of friends. There's this special sorrow that was recently described. That's the fear that their family will not be able to recover from their death, and that they will always carry the weight of this on their shoulders for the rest of their lives. And then, of course, the fear of the unknown. So we know that this fear of death is influenced by several factors, and age is usually what first comes to our mind. But then we also need to account for the child's experiences, not only her disease experience, but also the way that her family has dealt with previous losses, and so how do they deal with it? So the child takes that in. And then, of course, her culture, her religion, and even the way that media portray death in the society where the child is living, and we've heard that before. So let's talk just a little bit about age, and I said that before, I'm not a psychologist. So It's accepted that most children by age 7 have grasped the death concepts that allow them to start to worry about their personal mortality. But we know also from the work of Myra that even smaller children may already have some ideas about an afterlife, about heaven and hell. And of course, for these children, their utmost concern is separation from their loved ones, from their parents. And then we have teenagers. They will gradually acquire a more adult concept of death, and with that come the concerns about spirituality, about really what happens next, the unknown. And it's recently been described that if we help children have a better biological understanding of death, then the fear of death decreases, but then it raises again in adolescence. And it's easy to understand why, because adolescence is that time in life where they keep fluctuating, oscillating between dependence and autonomy, hopefully going more towards my left side, towards autonomy. But then severe illness intervenes and they're dying. So they will also be oscillating between being aware that they are dying and denying it because they want to live and they want to experience all those things that they probably haven't had an opportunity yet, or they want to keep on living. So how can we listen? The first thing is really to give the child a voice, give her the opportunity to speak. We should also let the child set the pace. Not us, this is not about us, it's about the child. We must be attentive. We must really keep our eyes and our ears open. We must be also attuned to hidden meanings, because children have so many different languages than the verbal language. And we should also try to create timely opportunities for communication, and especially not only between us and the child, but also between the child and the family. We have to help them work around the mutual pretense that nothing is wrong, that everything is fine, and that the child will not die. And we have to recognize, really, I've been using the verb to speak, but really children do so much more than speaking with verbal languages. They use so many other languages. And I just bring you a very recent example of a patient of mine whom I've known since the age of 4, and she was just diagnosed with a second relapse of a rhabdomyosarcoma. And this was 6 months after she finished treatment for the first relapse. So she's going to die. She has an incurable disease. But she doesn't want to talk about it. And one of these days, she was in hospital for a round of chemo, and she was drawing on a pad, and I asked if I could see what she was drawing, and this is what I found. And so I took the opportunity, and I said, well, this character, she looks a bit like Japanese anime, and she said, oh yes, I love everything Japan. And I remembered Sailor Moon. There was a cartoon some years ago. But Sailor Moon is a very happy and cheerful character. And I said, well, this reminds me a little bit of Sailor Moon, but she's looking so sad. Don't you agree with me? And she just looked at me and shrugged her shoulders and said nothing. And it's been like this ever since. So every time she comes in, I will ask to see her drawing pad, and she will have more of these. And, but she doesn't want to talk. But I keep insisting, because maybe one of these days we'll be able to address what's really bothering her. As you can see, she helped me because she wrote in English, you see. She wrote die, and she wrote fearless, and then she crossed it, and she wrote freak. And she's hiding behind her curtain bangs. So I think this says a lot. So what must we do? We've heard it before. Use open-ended questions, be honest, be concrete, unambiguous, use the words we really want to use. Be sensitive and empathic. Be in the hole with them, as Justin told us yesterday. We can also use some available resources or tell families to use them. And if the child is ready and wants to, we can also assist them in preparing a legacy. And I encourage you to look up the work by Chochinov, the dignity therapy. It's recently been applied to pediatrics. So some of the resources that we can use are, for instance, children's books. And they can be especially helpful for families because they really do provide an opportunity to start a conversation about dying, about these issues. But unfortunately, there are not many books about a child dying. There are some about death, but not about the child dying, not even in the English language. So this is an unmet need everywhere in the world, I would say. And then, of course, there are many other children's classics which are about death, and we can advise families to use this maybe as a starting point for a conversation, but these are not specific about a child dying. And if you're lucky to work in the United States and in pediatric oncology, there's this game, shop talk, and a workbook that can really help you with the psychologists in the team to talk and listen to a dying child. And what about families? Yesterday we heard wonderful talks about how we are many times in a very different place than parents about prognosis, and how we really must try to close that gap, and how to manage conflict when that arises. So I will just add that we must act as the child's advocates with the families and really highlight where the child is standing and what she needs from us and from her family. But we also need to look at ourselves. We cannot go into this unprepared. This is something I learned at my own cost. We have to really learn how to communicate more effectively, how to open our eyes and our ears. And I believe we also have to explore our own emotions, our suffering, our own future dying process, because we want to come out of that hole alive. So we have to prepare. And I'm sharing with you a new word I learned while preparing this talk, alexithymia. So hopefully we prepare ourselves and not be alexithymic, hopefully. So the right of a child to be listened is really enshrined in several charters and even in the Convention of the Rights of the Child. And I will call your attention, of course, to the Trieste Charter of the Maruzza Foundation. So we really must listen to all children, and especially to dying children. If we do that, we can help them make sense of what's going on between their inner and their outer worlds. We can help them understand. We can help them gain acceptance, maybe even some control over what's going on. Reframe hope, have new hopes, and maybe even create opportunities to keep on living, to come to a conclusion, and who knows, a good death. So, take-home messages. Prepare yourself. Really, this is not easy. We have to prepare ourselves to be with dying children. And when acting, let the child guide you. And as someone has said before me, be real and be there for the child. That's what she needs. And I finish with a quote from a wonderful paper that I also found while preparing this talk. It was written by a philosopher. He is analyzing the death of a child, Ilyusha, in this wonderful classic, The Brothers Karamazov. And he's talking about the different positions of the big guns city doctor and the family doctor, and how they approached differently the death of Ilyusha. And I really like the way that this author put it. We medical professionals are the caretakers of the truth. So not the spokesperson. So we don't have to speak. We have to listen and be there for the child. So thank you.